Cinephiles, film enthusiasts, and relaxation seekers. My name is Cinephile ASMR, and today we are talking all things spoilers about the Batman. So, to get this out of the way, I feel in order to really just have a good, comfortable space in this video, I want it to be a less edited, a bit more less refined video as opposed to my typical ones where this is more, as you can imagine, like a podcast, unedited, just my raw thoughts. Because for a movie as big and as many thoughts as I have for this movie, which just branch even beyond the film itself, I feel it is best articulated, just unedited. So if I do say a lot of ums and ands, I apologize. I'm trying to fix that. Trust me, I know a lot about my stutters and my ums and my pauses and my ands. I have to edit them out. So you're gonna kind of see that a lot. But yeah, so also, slight disclaimer, I have with me a water in case I get a bit of a dry throat. I typically in my videos do have water off to the side. So let's just take a little sip. Water is so good. And then of course in typical Cinephile ASMR fashion, it wouldn't be a proper video without M&M's. God, I wish this was product placement. I wish I would have M&M's sponsor me. That would be amazing. Try and open this a little lower so the sound isn't screwed up. But my goodness. Okay. So yeah, I said in my Adam Project video, I've seen this film 3 times, not 6, 3 times. I'm just gonna say it as plainly as possible without beating around the bush. I don't think there's ever been a film that I've seen theatrically that has infected my mind and plagued it, where I constantly am just thinking about some certain aspect or multiple details about the movie, as does the Batman. I mean, I saw the movie on Tuesday before it opened, and then I saw it Thursday, and then I saw it Friday. Yeah. God, yeah. And I'm planning to see it again. This is a movie that I'm. It's the kind of movie where you live in it, and you kind of don't realize its significance or how much it means to you, the people around you, in the world until years after. I mean, the most obvious answer and example would be The Dark Knight. So much of that film has been based around what people talk about after the fact, how much that movie has meant as a result and a catalyst for what was to come. And obviously we can't talk about how this movie has had implications for the future because we are living in the present, but I'm trying to seize that moment as best as I can. Take Avengers Endgame. I saw that movie once in theaters and I regret that. I wish I saw it more. I was much younger though, I didn't even have a car. And it's not even just trying to seize the moment for a crowd-pleasing movie. This is a film in every sense of the word. And you can kind of tell the moment the movie starts in what I said in my initial review as the greatest opening minutes to a comic book film I've ever seen. It is the perfect ushering into this world, into the themes, into the look and the feel. And I don't think there was more of a genius way of showcasing how big Batman as this persona means for the city of Gotham than by before we even see the caped Crusader, see Bruce Wayne in this suit. We just see what it has to deal with in the terms of effects on the criminals. When they see that light, that sign of the bat symbol in the sky, they all look to the dark corners of Gotham and they worry that he's there in the shadows when in reality he's not, or he might be, you don't know. And that ambiguity just sets it up for incredible atmosphere and world building. And then from there, what ensues is, upon reflection, something that I think, Matt Reeves is a god, I swear, because that bit at the end of that incredible fight, and we'll talk about the choreography, where you have Batman looking at the guy that he was trying to save from the goons, from the gang, and he's like, please, please don't hurt me. And you just see Bruce in his soul suit just looking at him, and then he looks to the sky. This is not Batman. And you don't even know that this is Batman until like the very end in terms of a name. He's called Vengeance. Even the gang doesn't even know who he is. He's been doing it for 2 years, and Gotham is still foreign because he hasn't made the typical mark that Batman does and has. So that was something that when I first saw the movie, and I cannot stress enough how much this movie benefits off of rewatches, seriously speaking, because it's a film where you get to see, especially in terms of growth from characters and setup, while also appreciating the meal of the film itself. You don't appreciate it until you see it multiple times, and that particularly when it goes to the end. Sorry if you also hear wind in the background, it is immeasurably windy outside. I wish I could control it. It messes with my allergies and sinuses. I'm sorry. So yeah, that opening was just terrific, and I haven't even talked about the Riddler, and that was something that I wanted to share, and I kind of like glossed over that in my review. That shot, which I do have a TikTok, I do make videos, kind of more to that later, but a lot of people that have been talking about the Batman have agreed that that introductory shot into the Riddler, because like the opening shot of the movie itself is the POV of him looking into the house, and then you see like it goes to the top where all like the glass is as like an entry point, but it's like you see him, and it's the senator, or the man that's running for Senate, and he's standing there, and it perfectly, like, that scene just summarizes so much, you know, how genius and methodical the Riddler is, how angry he is, but also the seediness and corruption that lies and permeates throughout Gotham, because you see the senator, and he's like, how is she still ahead? And it's not like he overtly says, okay, go kill her, or put a hit on her, but you can tell, like, he's the kind of person that would do anything possible to get what he wants, which speaks to the grander whole of so many of the corrupt leaders and politicians that run Gotham. And then when he moves out of frame, and I think when rewatching it, you can tell so heavily that this is a master at work, because it's like 3 different like shots that cut back to him. One is like more closer up, and then 2 that are back. Like the first one is like a medium shot, and then it goes back to a closer, like a closer up, like a close up, and then back to the medium, and then that's when he walks away, and that reveal of the Riddler, oh my, it's god-awfully terrifying, and that really speaks to, you know, direction, lighting, camera angles, acting, costuming. He was utterly terrifying, and then from there, like, we get to really evolve the story in many different ways, and this is a very much character-driven movie, and I believe shortly thereafter, we have what was at first kind of one of my bigger iffiness towards the movie, which was, sorry, Eminem time, Alfred and Bruce's relationship. It was a total surprise to me. That felt like something that my Dark Knight brain was conditioned to, which was expecting an Alfred and Bruce Wayne relationship akin to like a father and son with a lifetime's worth of history. And as I'm reading the comics and I'm kind of opening myself up into the different interpretations, it makes more sense. But that was one of my only real, like, not negatives, just more gray areas after the first watch, which was Alfred's characterization, especially how it impacts Bruce, because I feel like Alfred resembles so much to Bruce and his character in these movies. And it wasn't until I rewatched the movie and that first interaction in particular, like, says so much. as, you know, he's talking. He's like, "You're not my father, Alfred." And he's like, "I'm well aware." And then he leaves. Bruce leaves. And then Alfred stays, and then he sees. And I'm gonna talk about that part. That part. Oh God, there's 1, 2, 3. There's many moments. But if I could like pick like a top 3 moments that, especially when I saw the movie for a second and third time, I cried. Like, I saw this movie with a bunch of my coworkers the third time. I didn't hold back. I didn't. The amount of importance that this movie has for me and that it's showing for other people is immeasurable. And that's just the, you know, the beauty of art. But so Bruce leaves and Alfred stays, and he sees the shot of the glass. What would you call it? Like eye cam. And it's the little boy, and you just see Alfred's face. And this has to say with a lot of the actors in this movie. Colin Farrell, Zoe Kravitz, Andy Serkis, Robert Pattinson, John Turturro. Most especially with Robert Pattinson, Matt Reeves. Because I think a lot of people forget that silence is sometimes an even more powerful and difficult asset as a performer than words are. And you see the end product of that. But to be what I would give to be just a fly on the wall, hearing and seeing how Matt Reeves was able to articulate his vision of that to these actors in very differing manners and mannerisms, it's insane. And there's like that shot where Alfred looks, and it's just like he's just so saddened. And there's almost a part to me in that moment that reveals that Alfred feels really bad for saying that. And it's not like, I feel like that's like an obvious thing where he's like, "Oh, I'm well aware." And I guess jumping maybe a bit ahead in that relationship, you find that these are 2 very revered men who, like, or reserved men who don't communicate their feelings. They don't, because one was kind of bred into the CIA agent life, who is conditioned to combat war, tragedy, bloodshed, the loss of those around him within Alfred. And he says that in the hospital scene, which is my favorite scene in the entire movie, to Bruce. He's like, "I could teach you how to fight, but I couldn't teach you how to be a father." And then you have Bruce, this man detached because of his parents passing, seeing the corruption around his city that could have been potentially saved by his family, if not killed, literally collapse in on him. And he doesn't even know himself. This is the Batman story. This is his upbringing, his coming up into finding a means and a gateway to channeling these emotions, these untapped emotions, into their fullest positive potential. And seeing that unfold between these 2 characters in like maybe the 3 scenes that we get of them was one of the best treats that I could have had in the entire film rewatch cycle. And then that hospital scene, like I'm jumping all around, but I'm gonna forget it if I don't. They just hold each other's hand, and that, like, this movie understands what it's like. Sorry if you're airplane, I live not too far from an airport, but this film understands so much of natural flow, and particularly in the aspect of Batman and Bruce Wayne, I would just say Batman at this point, it's not like a movie that by the end he gets in his suit, he drives his rolls into Wayne Enterprises, goes to the shareholder meeting and says, "I bought all the shares." You know, it isn't like the Dark Knight, which is not a bad thing. These are just very different iterations of the character. But it's those small moments, like at the very end when he's talking to Gordon and he's about to talk to the Riddler, and he says, "You're a good cop," and then walks out. That is literally moving mountains for Bruce Wayne to express that level of emotion. And that hospital scene where he's talking about my biggest fear, I I would champion as one of the greatest of all times, and it would be Ryan Gosling in that movie. And I have found that you can dissect and extract so much more in silence, because a lot more is open to ambiguity and interpretation. And Matt Reeves really gets that with Robert Pattinson, and Robert Pattinson takes it and runs with it. And, jumping back, sort of, I want to talk about, like, how James Gordon and Bruce, like, having this movie take place 2 years in Batman's cycle in vigilantism as the Cubed Crusader opens the door for a lot of opportunities. For one, you get it indirectly without it being like word dump exposition, allow insight into the audience, or give insight for the audience towards these relationships. And you have like the parking garage scene with actually, and I want to talk about this because a lot of people, side note, you're gonna hear quite a few side notes. A lot of people talk about how dark this movie is, and it is. It's a very grimy, grungy, and a whole lot of G adjectives to describe Gotham. And it's disgusting, it's murky, it is corrupt, but there's also like some naturally inclusive moments of levity that fit for the story and the characters, like the thumb, and he's like, thumb, drive, and he's like, and I love Jeffrey Wright. His comedic timing is amazing. I would say like arguably, outside of like laughing out of fear and like just total like tripped out bewilderment from the Riddler, he is like the only character, like when at the very end he's like, the guy's like, oh, he shouldn't be touching that, and he walks over to him, he's like, he's wearing gloves, and then he looks back. It's not even like the true attention diverted towards talking with that guy, it's just like a natural evolution. And then with that part with the thumb drive, he's like, oh, this guy's hilarious. I love how in this movie it's a Gordon and a Wayne that act as a one-on-one together. It's not like, I wouldn't even say the Dark Knight trilogy takes Gordon and Bruce, like one is better than the other, but they're like in their own different lanes. Batman in this, or in the Dark Knight trilogy, is not really much of a detective, as he is more a fighter, and he analyzes and is very smart. And then you have like the Batfleck, which I don't really think is much of a detective at all. Like, he has Alfred doing most of that stuff, and mind you, I love all of these iterations. It varies and different, I think that's what works best. But it felt so good to have a detective one-for-one dynamic between each other and how they work off of one another and get each other out of situations. And from there, like, you have like this whole movie where that was, to me, okay, so like if I had to choose the biggest surprise in terms of least amount of screen time, it would be Alfred. But you've heard like what those moments mean to me and how important they are, as few and far between as they are. And then I wasn't expecting Alfred to have the most amount of screen time, but it works, and I love it. And it's like little details, like he's like, they're talking about like trust, and I forget how it kind of goes about, but it's like, I've known you for 2 years and I don't even know if like you trust me. And it's like, you're the only, like, and it's like these little breadcrumbs of emotion, and you gotta take it when you can, but it also reveals a lot. And it kind of goes like further than that, and then like you kind of get introduced to Selena, which, oh my gosh, Zoe freaking Kravitz, aside from just being incredibly beautiful, is such a profoundly eccentric and just wholly understanding performer, physically, emotionally. And I just, God, man, that scene where you have Bruce like looking like crap outside of the suit, just like watching her from, and this movie plays so heavily into POV, whether it be, basically following Bruce Wayne 90 to 95% of the entire movie. Like, every scene includes Bruce Wayne to some extent. Actually, I would maybe say all of it. Yeah. To excuse me, to like the way that shots are framed, like the car chase scene, which one of the greatest I've ever seen. How the shots of Batman are from the back, showing the car let's say, like, this was the camera, the microphone was the car, it's showing it from the back because the car's moving forward, and then the shots with the penguin are like in front of like a dash cam shot from the back, showing the back of the car from the front, because he's trying to drive away from the Batman. It's all about perspective, and I think Matt Reeves really harnesses an understanding and enriches to the fullest capability of that, and garners one of the most invoking, and it's like, oh my god, I really don't think we're ever, or if you really like pay attention or care about this kind of crap, I don't think we're ever going to see comic book movies the same, especially ones that feel more studio, because when you give a director entire creative vision, it's so impossible to not feel that and think that in its 100% capacity, like Warner Brothers did for Matt Reeves anymore. I feel so spoiled and loved, and I don't know, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I physically don't think there is a more comfortable feeling as an audience member to realize that the filmmaker and creative team behind these movies feel these worlds so realized, and they get it. They're not doing anything half-assed or on a limb or on a whim. It's entirely 100% calculated and with reason. Even the stuff at the end where I'm very much questioning, like, you don't sink Gotham, the like literal breeding ground for Bruce Wayne as a character, to grow without knowing where that's gonna go. I mean, a flooding of a massive metropolitan city like Gotham, which is akin to like Chicago or New York, would take years to fix, and even then you're going to have implications and ramifications for decades. So when I think about like, oh my god, where the hell is this movie gonna go, I don't see it being like a No Way Home situation where it's outside of Gotham. No way, especially when you've painted a story so grounded in reality. My only thought would be like, is it gonna be a time jump then? I don't know, but I will say it does open the door for showing an already like crime-filled, disgusting Gotham more so than ever, with the implications of this flood, the water damage, and so on and so forth. And I implore you to look up the concept art for this movie, because a lot of it is pretty much from like panel to screen. It's wonderful, but it just really gives you like a much more understanding perspective towards like how in-depth these comic book artists and storyboard artists went. It's wonderful. But okay, enough of small tangents. Again, I'm sorry. I did try to forewarn you, so I appreciate if you've gotten this far back. Maybe slight like water intermission break. Give me 1 second. Oh god, I love water so much. Quite underrated. But yeah, so aside from, I've gushed about like the technical aspects, and I probably will more so, but I want to talk about more about the performances, because god almighty, I'm gonna say one of the things that I was quite concerned about was this written interview that I saw, and from what we've seen, and I talked about this in my review a little bit, which was that Colin Farrell, and it makes sense like story-wise, narratively, Colin Farrell said that the Penguin fears Falcone. He looks up to him, as does the rest of the city of Gotham, not out of desire, but not complacency, but a necessity to, out of fear that their lives will be taken if proved otherwise. And rewatching Batman Begins in preparation for this movie, the actor who plays Falcone, and that's another thing, like continuity-wise, or not continuity, just like different people, soups, kids, like different cooks in the kitchen. Is it Falcone or Falcone? I like Falcone more, but I guess like the one thing that I can say, like by them saying it's Falcone, it makes the Rata Alata bit make more sense, because it's like Falcone, Falcon. Yes, Falcon, the word is in Falcone, and it's like a small tidbit, but I was like, okay, like Falcone, Falcon, makes more sense. But okay, Colin Farrell, like he feared his character Oz, the Penguin, fears being on the wrong side of Falcone, and we didn't get much of anything in the promotional footage or trailers for the movie pertaining to Falcone, and I was really nervous. But John Turturro, I will never doubt that man again in my life. And I'm watching this Apple TV show, which I actually might make a video on depending on where it goes, called Severance, directed by Ben Stiller. It's incredible. And seeing the juxtaposition in terms of performances from like the crime kingpin lord himself to a lot more of a soft-hearted old man in that show. The man has unbelievable range, and he was terrifying. He was absolutely terrifying. Like in the funeral scene where they're talking about how Thomas Wayne operated on him when he couldn't go to a hospital. It's just like God, man, it's like performers and their performances. It's insane stuff. And being able to talk to like people who care about acting to the pedigree that they do is one of the most insightful things as someone who wants to be behind and sometimes even in front of the camera like I am now. Because how you are able to speak as if you literally have power to your name, and you have these history and you have these moments that you're speaking as an actor about, but it sounds so tangible and real, blows my mind. And I freaking loved John Turturro's Falcone. He was disgustingly devilish. He was a man that I feared. And regardless of like the amount of prosthetics and makeup that Colin Farrell did, which was Oscar worthy, I did feel that Falcone was the man above him, at least for the beginning of the movie. And I was just blown away. And then you do have the Penguin, Colin Farrell, and that man, I mean, I've loved Colin Farrell for years, and when he chooses like right roles which focus on his acting abilities, he will go to the moon. But this man relished in every single moment that he was in, and he's a reason why he's a fan favorite amongst the fan base and the people that have seen this movie. It's just spellbinding what that man can do. From the jump, like, I think the opening shot of him is what we've seen in the trailers, where he's like, take it easy, sweetheart. His accent's like a Jersey, New York, but like with a groggle down there, and you know it's insane when he's like Irish. I think I should have maybe confirmed that from when I made the video of my non-spoiler review to this, but it's nuts. And then like the big reveal that Selena is Falcone's daughter was so perfect from a thematic and storytelling perspective, as it lends to the absolute horrible man that Falcone is, how careless he is. He just thinks about himself, how corrupt the system is, and what this means for Selena as a person who has never had a true home to attach herself to. And like the way that ties into Bruce and like their moments together in the house when she was trying to get Annika's passport, and their little like physical dance, and that oh my god, Greg Fraser, he shot Dune, Mandalorian, Rogue One, but I'm gonna say this is his best work. I'm sorry, I feel like, I guess, don't get me wrong, like a lot of this movie is within those, I wish I knew what those, the actual literal term was, the screens that they used it in Mandalorian, which got really popular with, where they like computer generate the images onto a screen and then they shoot it around the screen. It just makes it a lot more tangible and immersive, in my opinion, and I think it's kind of cheaper. But that shot where they're in the house trying to grab Annika's passport, and it's just like it slowly goes in on them as they're like, as she's covering her mouth. It just displays such a level of acting. Oh god. But yeah, so like the fact that these story beats and details, such as Falcone being Selena's father, can mean so much for multiple different reasons and bolster an already incredible story that's genius storytelling. And it works so fundamentally well. And then as you go along in the story, you get these little nuggets of like setup. And I've talked about this on my TikTok before, where it feels like foundational seeds being set for where it is to come. And it isn't just like a grand setup with with a movie that just feels like a placeholder for what there is to be, because this is a 3-hour epic movie that dives into so many different genres, and it takes all of these people behind and in front of the camera to their fullest. But it also is an origin story for everyone. Gordon isn't commissioner in the beginning of the movie, he's only lieutenant. The guy, I forget his name, what was it, like something Savage, I believe, something like that. The guy with the glasses, he is the commissioner. Then he gets killed by Riddler, and then by the end you would assume that, you know, Gordon's going to become the commissioner. You have Selina, who has been trapped within the confines of Gotham and the corruption, being at the whim of men, of misogynistic people who've done things and used her objectively to objectify. And now she's finally able to flee that place, go to Bloodhaven, which sets up a whole other potential can of worms. And then you have Alfred and Bruce now finally expressing themselves in their vulnerability and finding that common ground and seeing where that's gonna go from there. You have the Penguin as he stands in Falcone's office overlooking the flooded Gotham. You could just tell, like, he has plans. He's setting things up again in that silence. Or you have, you know, Batman, how in the beginning of the movie the guy feared him, looking up at Bruce saying, please don't hurt me. No one knew who he was going to vengeance. And then by the end, my favorite line in the entire movie, obviously, like, I don't think it's necessarily fair to say, like, because, like, the last few minutes of that movie where he has, like, that internal monologue about channeling that grief and anger will go down in history as one of my favorites. But one, like, in terms of a smaller scale, was that the scene where Selina's about to shoot Falcone, and she's, like, so angry, and Bruce is holding on to her, and she's like, I want him to pay, and then Matt Reeves, oh my god, he says, but you don't have to pay with him. Oh my god. Never in my life has a line more encapsulated the entire meaning behind Batman as a character. And it wasn't until I saw it again that that's the scene that lost me. Not the most, though. But I say that because my favorite, like, bit in the movie, like, my favorite scene is the exchange between Alfred and Bruce. My favorite line is that with the Catwoman and Bruce, like, you don't have to pay with him. My favorite bit in the movie is at the very end, and it's so many things conveyed in, like, the matter of 10 seconds, when Bruce is holding the lady out of the wreckage, and he puts her on the stretcher, and she holds on to him, and Robert Pattinson, like, looks at his arm. This is, like, something completely foreign. Someone showing physical attachment to him in terms of protectiveness, and he looks for a second, then he grabs her, and I thought he would, like in any, like, certain circumstance, it would have, like, taken it off. He holds on to it, and he looks at her, and she gets, like, pulled up, and he, like, just, like, he holds, it's at first, like, a foreign thing, then he accepts it, and it's, like, in that moment right there, he knows exactly what he has to do going forward. I'm, like, getting emotional just thinking about it, and then he, like, watches her go up, and he just looks, and it's at that moment right there he realizes why he's doing what he's doing and what he needs to do to be different. And it isn't, like, aside from the Joker's letters, it really isn't mentioned once at all, the Batman. And it isn't until, like, the very end of the movie where he talks, and he's, like, talking to Gordon, and he's like, it might be the end for the Batman. Oh my god. There is so many things to unpack about this movie. It's so dense. There is so much creatively driven behind it. And, like, I will say, like, aside from the Alfred and Bruce stuff, the one thing that I did have an issue, like, at first, not an issue, just the gray, was Riddler and the third act. Because you have, like, you think about all the iconic characters that Batman can go up against, and you have, like, you know, Bane, Mr. Freeze, Joker, Riddler, all of these characters. And logistically, Riddler is not a fighter. is a person that torments you mentally. So it makes sense, and it's in the trailers, like Matt Reeves, and I will say the trailers reveal way too much, but that is an ongoing issue within movies nowadays. But you have that shot and that scene of Riddler getting caught, and you know it's Riddler because Paul Dano's playing him, of getting caught in the diner. And it sets up like that grand finale. And at first I was like, okay, this is like slightly structured, like weirdly in my opinion. It flows amazing. It's just structured differently. And upon rewatch, it makes so much more sense now, because up until that point, the only real person that I think you can like confidently say trusts Batman is that little boy to the guy who is running for Gotham Senator. But outside of that, there's nobody. So you had to have a Gotham level event happen, which would therefore require people to acknowledge the importance of Batman and see that he is a hero worth defending. And I guess that that makes sense now. But initially I was like, whoa, because you go in these incredible first 2.5 acts, maybe like 3 out of 4 of the film, and you follow the Riddler, you follow like this rabbit hole that just gets deeper and deeper and much more crazy. And then you have like his traps, which are so like Saw-esque. I was not expecting that, first of all. It just leans so much more into the horror aspect of it all. And then it builds, and then he just kind of lets himself free, which is all a part of the plan. And then you have his goons that like just will follow him, and they're like, oh, rifles are good. And to me, it really expressed a lot about like white fragility. And I'm not trying to say that like Edward Nashton wasn't valid in what he felt. I definitely think like at the end of the movie, he won. He sought out to shine the mirror onto Gotham for the corruption that they are, the leaders, and what they signify. And there was no turning point from that. He knew it, and he won. Like the Gotham and the narrative will never be the same since that. So it makes total sense. And then you have his people that will follow him, his like cultists, and it felt like a lot about like white fragility, and obviously like white nationalists, and just like bigoted racists who were targeting these people. But it worked. It worked for the narrative of the movie. It just got bigger and bigger. But it also goes to like that full circle moment, because you build this movie on finding more and more how deep this manifested corruption is, whether it be through the leaders themselves or the city as a whole as a result. And you follow Batman and Bruce Wayne as he just gets more and more detached, and the whole Wayne discovery doesn't help at all. And the set design and how like it peels back the layers, like you're able to physically feel this greed and all of it, especially from the renewal act, just work its way throughout. And I felt it, and you keep going, and then by the end, when rewatching the movie especially, you realize a lot of people keep comparing The Dark Knight to The Batman, which is the better film. I think it's very stupid. It's one thing to say I prefer one over the other because I associate it with X, Y, and Z more than A, B, and C, which is totally valid. And if you want to compare the two, by all means, but I think it's unfair to both of the movies because they seek to tell different stories with different Batmen. But I will say, I've been hearing a lot about like the interrogation scenes between The Dark Knight and the Batman, but I think they're vastly different. One is an interrogation between Joker and Batman, and the other feels like a mirror being put onto both of these individuals who in many ways don't know how to act like adults because they never had families that were there to implement such. And that amazing like monologue, I guess, where you have Riddler going on about you don't know what it's like to be an orphan. And I'm not gonna lie, like if you made it this far into the video, thank you. Minus like, obviously I've rambled, I apologize, thank you. You might want to hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't, mean the world. But I've been having like quite a few ideas with a certain character in mind, the Riddler. I might do roleplay, I might not, I don't know, we'll see, depending on like where I go creatively from here. gorgeous. And it's funny because I will say, Zack Snyder does something really well, especially in the warehouse scene of BVS, where when you feel, like, obviously the sound design is amazing, but when he punches, he being Batman, a goon, I say goon a lot just because it makes it easier for me, when he punches a goon, you could see the sweat, like, bouncing off their body, like, boom, like that. And it does this quite a bit, like in the nightclub sequences as well, and it's so more effective in my opinion. I loved it. And the choreography when he fights in the grand finale, and then he sacrifices himself by cutting the wire, and he just falls. It was, God, man, it was so freaking good. And then the ending, and it sets up, Selena leaves, he drives off into Gotham, understanding what it is to be Batman now, and then it ends. But it's that journey that goes along with it. And I'm not gonna lie, having this channel now, taking reviews and watching movies, not just critically, just with more of a keen sense of awareness, has left me finding that these experiences are much more worthwhile. They were as they was to begin with, but it adds this whole other layer and foundation of an appreciation towards the art that I'm watching. And it's like, I think about, like, in the past, when I watched Spider-Man, I couldn't wait to do a review. I sadly got COVID, but then when I was watching COVID, or when I got COVID, I was just watching so many Matrix stuff, and then I did my review, and it's like, all of these movies now that I've talked about are associated to this, and I can't thank you guys enough. And I feel like partly why I didn't want to edit this is because you can just, like, I want you to see, if you've made it this far, this passion that I have, and I want to do so much with this channel, I really do. And it's been with this movie particularly, that every time I've seen this film, it has been a love letter in my head to art, creative freedom, the middle finger to studios that completely strip the directors and creatives of their identity, what it means to be a good storyteller, storytelling in general. And, like, I've gotten a lot of feedback. The Jim Gordon roleplay has been overwhelmingly positive. When I first posted it, I was like, oh man, it's not doing the best. But then the movie came out and people were being very receptive, and it just is like, this movie, it's kind of, I think there's like a phrase about, like, good food elicits good conversation, and it's like good art elicits just good energy. And this movie will forever be signifying and indicative of that. It's a fantastic movie, and there's so many aspects and parts about it that I could talk about for hours. But for now, like, I hope you were able to kind of understand a bit more as to why I gave the movie an A+, or why I adore it, and why it means so much to me, because Batman isn't like a beacon of light. It isn't this beaming individual that is the gold standard. He is a human, a fundamentally flawed human, who is like a light, a candle, or a switch in a dark room. And I don't know, like, obviously we don't live in Gotham. We probably do have quite a few corrupt leaders, which is a fact, unfortunately. But we know what it's like to feel alone. We know what it's like to feel abandoned. We know what it's like to try and do things even though the way we are doing them is wrong, but it comes from a good place. That detachment, that fear, that anger is all showcased on display in this movie in beautiful, orchestrated fashion. And I don't think I've resonated with a movie in a very long time. And I feel like it might be difficult because I've praised so many movies on this channel, but we've gotten great art. Dune, Shang-Chi, No Time to Die, Eternals, Spider-Man, The Matrix, Free Guy, Adam Project, like, all these movies I've been talking about, and they've meant such an insurmountable deal to me. And this, I'm not trying to say, like, this movie is above that, but it's just, like, it feels so good to talk about art. And I know this was, like, kind of all over the place, and I'm sorry for that, but I hope in doing so you were able to feel relaxed, comfortable, and love the way that you guys have in your own individual way, even by watching this, liking, commenting, subscribing, even if you did that, which is mind-blowing to me. you thought. If you got to this point, comment Connor Sims for Robert Pattinson or something like that, just because then I will know you were like a freaking true fan. But you guys are all fans. I love you guys. It's late. I've been having a great day. I have these M&Ms to polish off. Yeah, I probably won't edit any of this, so I'm sorry, but hey, I hope you enjoyed. God, just the energy feels so good right now. Please, let me know what you're doing, how you're doing, and what your favorite part about the Batman was, what your favorite part about this video was, any recommendations for movies, content, or just ideas towards this channel, let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, please, 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 remember,